No matter how you look at it, abilities in Valorant are some of the most powerful tools in the game, and it's important to master them if you want to reach your full potential as a Valorant player. So whether that's improving the timing of your abilities to get the most value, or learning new and creative ways to use them to catch the enemies off guard. Either way, knowing how to get the most out of your abilities is the most important part to the game. So in this video, I'm going to be going over the 10 abilities that most players are using wrong in order to help you get the most value out of them. To kick off our list, we have Phoenix's Blaze. Phoenix's Wall is a very strong ability that has a lot of versatility to it. Not only can it be used similarly to an on-the-go Viper Wall to block lines of sight, but it can also be used to heal yourself in a pinch if you take damage. However, most people only really use it for the latter reason, and because of that, we are missing out on a lot of what this ability can do. Yes, healing yourself is very helpful in a lot of situations, but as a Phoenix, your job isn't always to heal yourself and just stay alive. It is to make space for your team and to get on sight. You can use it to clear sight by splitting it in half, decreasing the number of angles you expose yourself to at the same time. This can help you safely clear certain angles without worrying about getting shot in the back from an enemy holding a cheeky angle. Not only that, but Blaze also has a great synergy with Phoenix's Flash. One problem with Phoenix's Flash though is that it's thrown in the open, meaning you have to be standing near a wall a lot of the time to avoid flashing yourself without messing up your crosshair placement. Phoenix's Wall lets you get around that by allowing you to throw a flash through it and then peek out of it, thus blinding anyone on the other side of the wall while avoiding getting flashed yourself. There are so many great ways to use Phoenix's Firewall besides just healing, and if you play Phoenix, you should try out some of the ways I've mentioned to see for yourself. Next up on this list, we have Yoru's Fake Out. Is this really a surprise though? No, I would argue that this is probably one of the harder abilities in the game to get a proper grasp of, simply because they're not as straightforward as something like a Flash or a Molly. The thing with Fake Out is that most players don't really have a clue about what they're doing with them, and they usually just throw them out for no reason and don't have a plan for them. So when using the footsteps, you really have to think about where the enemy might be playing so that you can get the most out of them. If you throw out your footsteps somewhere where they can see them, then they aren't going to be tricked by them. But what you can do is mess with them a little bit. So sometimes what you can do is once you drop them and let the enemy see them, and then you can swing off them and catch the enemy off guard. Another thing that players don't really understand about Fake Out is that it's not just about the outplays. Sometimes it's about denying the enemy information or just messing with their util. Yoru's Footsteps can actually be used to set off some abilities like Cypher's Tripwires, or Raze's Broombot, basically nullifying those abilities for the round. So if you're a Yoru main, make sure to think about how you're going to use this ability, and always make sure you have a plan before you put them down. For our third ability, we're going to be looking at Soba's Recon Dart. When it comes to the Recon Dart, there are two big mistakes that I see players make the most when using it. The first mistake I see is the position of the dart. When it comes to the positioning of the dart, there are two things you should take into consideration. The first thing to do is to make sure the dart is high up, and the second is that it's hard to shoot. The reason you want the dart to be high up is because it's harder to avoid. So if you have a dart that is too low to the ground, it's more likely to have its line of sight blocked by a box or a piece of geometry, making it easier to avoid than a dart that is higher up. When it comes to making a dart harder to shoot, the easiest way to do that is to get the dart to land behind an enemy so they have to turn around to shoot it. So aiming at something like a back wall while the team is pushing makes it really hard for the team to shoot it while they're focused on clearing angles. An example of where I use this on a map like Breeze, where I usually play A with Soba, I can use a dart on top of the door to see enemies that are pushing from behind the Viper's wall to get free kills. This dart is really hard for the enemy team to shoot because they are trying to push towards the site, and in order to shoot it, the enemies have to put themselves in a risky position where if they accidentally get tagged, they suddenly become free kills. Now the second mistake I see is that we're not using the dart at the right time. When timed correctly, Soba's dart has the ability to scan and reveal an entire team. This not only gives your team a ton of information, but also gives them the opportunity to get free kills on enemies either through walls or through a smoke. Now on attack, the dart timing should ideally be coming down right before your team enters the site, thus making it hard for defenders trying to hold the site to shoot since they're worried about the players that are currently pushing them. This also gives your team the best possible chance to follow up on the dart and confirm the kills. Now on defense, there are a couple ways to use the dart, such as for a site retake or to help hold down a site. When it comes to the timing, you need to make sure the enemy team is actually pushing when you use it to hopefully catch them all out in the open while they're executing. If it's too early or too late, your dart gets no real value. Luckily, there are some great indicators of when it's a good time to dart, such as if you see enemy smokes go down, an enemy flash, or a jet dashes onto site. Now there is a lot I can say when it comes to the timing of Soba's Recon Dart, but I really don't have time to go over it in depth in this video. But if you are looking for a more in-depth guide on how to play Soba or any of the other agents, why not check out SkillCapped.com. The website has guides for every single agent in the game made by Immortal and Radiant level players who are all dedicated to helping you improve your agent mastery. The website is also backed by a rank improvement guarantee, so there's no risk at all when signing up. So if you're looking to improve quickly at your favorite agent, click the link in the description to check out the website. Now let's get back to the video. The fourth ability that most players are using incorrectly in Valorant is Astra's Gravity Well. Trust me, I know Astra can be a very difficult agent to play, but if you take some time to really master some of her powerful abilities like the Gravity Well, you'll start to see yourself winning a lot more games. The Gravity Well is one of the most powerful abilities in the game, providing CC as well as making enemies vulnerable at the end of its duration. It's also very strong as a post-plant tool to stall enemies that are trying to defuse the bomb. It can also be combined with many other abilities like a Molly or Soba's Shock Dart to get even more value, but it's also one of the abilities that I see players using incorrectly the most often. On post plans, I've seen way too many Astras put their star directly on the bomb and try to use their Gravity Well, when the thing is that the ability actually pulls the player to the center of it. So if you want to pull a player off the bomb, you need to put the star a little off to the side to ensure that they will be pulled off. Now, I've noticed a lot of Astras don't really communicate with their team about how they plan to use their stars in order to combo with their team. If you have an agent like Killjoy on your team, just asking them where they plan on putting down their mollies and then putting a star down on them can guarantee you a lot of extra free damage. When playing Astra, you also need to make sure that you're using your map as well, especially in solo queue, because you won't always have teammates that use their mics all the time. So sometimes you'll just have to use other indicators from your map to know when it's the best time to activate your Gravity Well. We're now approaching the halfway point of our list, and with the fifth ability, we're going to be looking at Killjoy's Lockdown. Killjoy's ultimate is a very powerful ultimate that forces enemies to react whenever it's placed down. The thing with Killjoy's ult is that it's not that the players are using it wrong, but that they're not taking into account the context of the game or round when they're using it. The fact that it can pretty much clear an entire site all on its own if used correctly, but using it sub-optimally could cost you that round that you otherwise would have won. So the most important thing to think about when using the ultimate are the available counters that the enemy team has. Paying attention to things like what ultimates are available or what sites are certain agents playing on can be a huge difference maker. For example, if you know that the enemy team has a Soba or a Brim, you might want to bait out their ultimates before you use your lockdown, since those are the big counters. Or say you're playing on a map like Fracture and the enemy team has a Breach. Aftershock is one of the best counters for this ultimate and only costs 200 credits. So if you know which site the Breach usually plays on, you can easily use the ult on the other site to avoid it getting destroyed and ensuring that it goes off. Also, if an enemy team has too many counters for the ult, it's sometimes better to fake a site with it, and then you have your team push the opposite site after you put it down, since most players will rotate right after seeing it. Of course, sometimes you don't necessarily care if the lockdown does go off, and in these situations, it's actually better to bait out the Soba ult for the Killjoy lockdown. Also, if an enemy team has too many counters for the ult, it's sometimes better to fake a site with it, and then have your team push the opposite site right after you put it down, because most players will rotate after seeing it. So overall, Killjoy's Lockdown is a very powerful ultimate, but it's important to always be aware of what's going on in your game so you are able to get the most out of it in your specific situation. We're now over halfway through our list, and the sixth entry for abilities that most players are using wrong is Omen Sidestep. Although Omen has not been at the top of the meta for a while now, there are still plenty of Omen mains running around. On top of that, Omen is still one of the easier controllers to pick up, so a lot of the players that need to fill on a role end up picking him since Astra has a bit higher learning curve. It's not uncommon to see an Omen buy both charges in the first 2 or 3 rounds of a half and never use them all game. Contrary to popular belief, Shadow Step is actually a very strong ability because it can be combined with his paranoia to make crazy plays, but the ability to reposition on the fly is strong on its own. It allows you to place certain off angles on top of boxes that agents like Jet and Raze can, and it can be used to kill and then reposition somewhere to make it really hard for players to know where you are. Shadow Step is a lot stronger of an ability that most people give credit for, and I think the main reason that it gets such a bad rap is that most players just don't really understand the value that it can bring. The next ability on our list is another flash that most players are using wrong, and that's Sky's Guiding Light. This ability is very powerful. Not only is it a flash, but it also doubles as an info gathering tool. But although that may be true, it's still important to remember that this ability is still a flash. Now, I've seen people use it to just get information more times than I can count, and although sometimes that can be useful, more often than not it's just kind of wasted. At the end of the day though, Guiding Light is a flash, and we feel like not enough people use it properly. It's strongest when the enemy team doesn't have time to react to it, and you can use it to flash around a corner similar to Phoenix's flash, or to pop flash out of a smoke to catch enemies off guard. Since Sky's flash has more range than the other flashes in the game, you can also use it to help your teammates push onto a site. So again, yes, Guiding Light is good for getting your team information on enemy's position, but it's also important not to forget that it is a flash, and at the end of the day, using it like one is very important for getting the most out of your sky pick. We're now on to our 8th entry onto this list, and for this we have Raze's Paint Shells. Raze's grenade is very strong in that it's capable of getting a lot of chip damage and even confirming kills all on its own, and it's also one that I see players use incorrectly quite often. Now, too many players just throw it out without much thought, and yes, sometimes they do get a free kill with it, but that's not the best way to use it. Now you may be asking yourself, well, it's a grenade. How else are you supposed to use it? Well, the best way to use Raze's Paint Shells is to throw them where you know an enemy is because of a teammate's util like a Soba dart or a Sky Dog, and then once you know where the enemy is due to your teammate's util, you can throw the grenade and then swing on it to get the best results. On top of that, it can also be combined with the Astra's Gravity Well to make it even more deadly. This is a great way to guarantee a kill with this powerful ability pretty much every single round. Not only is it good for confirming kills, but it's also great at denying the enemy team space. For example, if you're playing on split and your team is pushing in mid to B, throwing your grenade and ropes can help stop the enemy from pushing out and killing you and your teammates from the back while you take heaven. There's just so much value being left on the table by so many Raze players, and just learning how to play off your grenade better can help you win so many more rounds. We're now nearing the end of this list, and for the 9th spot we have another ultimate, Viper's Pit. This ultimate is very powerful and arguably one of the best in the game, capable of clutching out rounds that seem unwinnable in any other situation. And even though it seems easy to use at first glance, there are still some common mistakes that I see that could be costing you rounds. The problem is that when most players put down Viper's Pit, they don't really put much thought into where it's going to be placed. Usually, just right on top of the spike after it's planted is the go-to spot. When using Viper's Pit, you need to think of it as like a smoke and think about which choke points you want to block with it. When ulting on defense, you want to make sure that you put it down so that you cover all the choke points that the enemies need to push through so that when you hold those choke points from inside the Viper Pit, you'll be able to catch them off guard. If you don't, enemies are going to be able to just walk around and flank you and your team. On offense, you can use it to either create space and get your team onto site, or to cover the bomb to make it hard for enemies to retake it. However though, the same principles still apply. When putting down the pit, you should be thinking about where the enemies are going to be retaken from so you can force them to push through it. A great example of this would be on the map Breeze, where enemies are going to be retaken from around the pyramids. An ult that I like to use is right here near the middle of the site. This blocks off the enemies trying to push through either the middle of the pyramids or from the left side of the site, funneling them straight into my team on the right side. Now, it's not mechanically difficult to put down a great Viper ult, but it does take a bit of forward thinking to make sure you get the most value out of it. And with that, we are now into our last ability of our list, and that's going to be KO's 0 point. Although KO has not been the most popular agent in solo queue, he has been starting to see more play in the pro scene. During Champions, we had a chance to see him being played on multiple teams on different maps, and because of that, it's pretty likely we'll start to see him being played more in solo queue. And although he hasn't seen much play yet, there are still some mistakes I see players make when he does get picked. When it comes to 0 point, most players usually just throw it out at the beginning of the round to get the information about who is there. This could be a good strategy sometimes, especially if you plan on pushing up after, but there are much better ways to use it. You really want to use KO's knife to stall a push, or force the enemy team to push without their utility, and doing this is all about timing. For example, if you see an Omen smoke go down, you can use your knife to suppress it. This leaves the enemy team in an awkward situation where they only have one smoke down, and they can't put the other one down yet. Or if you use your knife after the enemy jet dashes in, you can disable the rest of her team, leaving her stuck in the open with no help. KO's knife can also cancel very powerful abilities like a Soba drone or Sky's dog. So when using 0 point, sometimes it's important to be patient and wait for the right moment to get the most value out of it. Lastly, if you really want to get the most value out of all your abilities, make sure you're keeping up with us at SkillCapped.com. We put a lot of effort into making sure you're getting the best of the best guides, so I can honestly say you're really missing out if you're not a part of our website. All that being said though, this concludes our list of the 10 abilities that you're using wrong in Valorant. Now hopefully this list was able to help some of you guys out, and maybe you even noticed some mistakes in your gameplay that you can start to work on. Of course, with so many different abilities in the game, there are plenty more mistakes that players are making with their abilities. So if there are some common mistakes with abilities that you see in your games, feel free to let us know in the comments. But with that, that's all I have for this video, so if you made it this far, don't forget to leave a like, and as always, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.